Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Toby's Sideshow of Scale Styrene. The show's about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the time has come for the big reveal of the 11th wonder of the world, the Tom Daniel Paddy Wagon Circus Wagon Kit Bash. Hold on to your seats, it's going to be a bumpy ride. I've actually got four of the circus wagons. Two of them have been built now. Two more still in the stash. One remains sealed. I plan on building all four despite the fact that one of them is sealed. I'm hoping to land a fifth one. This by far is probably my favorite Tom Daniel's show rod, the Circus Wagon, originally the Dragon Wagon. And here's the instructions for the original. I had two of these when they first came out because I liked the kit so much. It says here 1969 for the copyright. I thought it was 1970. I might have been wrong. But in any case, the original instruction sheet is all I have left of the Dragon Wagons. I'm looking for like a box or something. The Circus Wagon Repop actually came out in 2009, and the reason the name changed from Dragon Wagon to Circus Wagon is because Mattel owned the copyright for the Dragon Wagon name. So Tom Daniel, even though it is his design, he did everything with it. He came up with the 10th wonder of the world, was not allowed to call his model kit the original name. The Circus Wagon is what it ended up turning into. But any modeler knows that it's the Dragon Wagon with an improved dragon. If you see here, the new dragon has 4 parts because it has new arms on it. Otherwise, it's got the 2 body sections. The older dragon was a 2-part dragon. This part's 43 and 44. The arms were molded into there. That's how you can really tell the difference between them. The other major difference is part number 14 on the Dragon Wagon. Right up here was the Tiger Tail shifter. The new one, well, let's see. It says a Tiger Tail shifter, but as you can tell, it's actually the oil can shifter out of the Hangman, because the Dragon Wagon was basically modified into the Hangman, and then they had to retrofit it back into the Circus Wagon in order to release it. And they actually talk about that on here, where it says the brand new retro tooled Circus Wagon complete with new and improved baby dragon are back for good. Unfortunately, the back for good only lasted as long as Revell stayed in business, so these may never come back again. But in any case, time for the big reveal of the one I just finished. So as the ringmaster would say, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, introducing the Circus Wagon, in this case with the Dragon Uncaged. So he's no longer breaking out of the cage. He is actually out. The cage has been repaired and the back door is wide open. So, and as you can tell, we've got a new power plant up front and new suspension system up front too. And we've added new fenders to it. Yeah, this is actually a kit bash, I guess, of the Paddy Wagon and the Circus Wagon together now. And what's really interesting is when I started to do this, I realized, I basically found a bunch of old sketches that I had done back around when the Circus Wagon or the Dragon Wagon first came out, and I had actually done a drawing of a kit bash between the Paddy Wagon and the Dragon Wagon. So I'll show a photo of that real quick, and then we'll get back to this.
So the sketch is of the Dragon's Paddy Wagon, which is a kit bash of the Dragon Wagon and the Paddy Wagon. And it was actually inspired by the Root Beer Baron, which was a kit bash actually that showed up in a magazine article. But I also drew that one in the same sketchbook. And for some reason, my mother kept this sketchbook. I did it way back when I was in fifth or sixth grade back in 1969, 1970, somewhere around there. And fortunately for me, I had tucked the instruction sheet for the Dragon Wagon inside the sketchbook, so it was a double bonus. I still have the sketchbook and I also have the instructions to the Dragon Wagon because for some reason my mother decided to keep this.
Okay, before going into the various tweaks I had to do to get this green Circus Wagon to look the way it did, I thought I would do a side-by-side comparison of one that is virtually stock. The only difference in this and what would be a stock Circus Wagon is right here, and that is a cotton candy shifter that I came up with to replace the oil can shifter that is not correct for the Circus Wagon. And also I did it in purple and white instead of red and yellow. But otherwise you've got the dragon busting out of his cage and all of the appropriate decals that you see on the original Circus Wagon. And then over here you see the Circus Wagon all opened up with the cage repaired and all of the parts, the front end of a paddy wagon. And so with that said, let's move on to some various building that it took to get to the final assembly of my new Circus Wagon, and then maybe another spin around the turntable before I do a slideshow. So it's like the build that never ends. Right when I was thinking I was almost done, I decided I really don't want to use the hoop window on this one. So I thought, well, I'll find a different frame from a Model T, and I couldn't find one that would actually fit this car. So I decided, well, let's take a chance at making one, and if it doesn't work, then I'll go back and use the hoop. And so this is what I've got so far. And then I started scrounging through kits. I did not want to waste an entire kit for a new window. Well, I was willing to do that, but I started looking through 3-in-1 kits. And the closest thing I could find was this Model A window, which is way too large for it. But inside there was a piece of acetate for the windows. And obviously there's only 2 options that you have for the windows plus a rear window, so there's plenty of extra acetate. So I decided I would use a piece of this acetate and try and frame my own window. And so I started working with this right here, if it'll focus. It's basically a piece of 1/16 inch rectangular evergreen strip that I decided to cut down to size to make a window. And this is the window I have right now, and I'm kind of eyeballing it to try and make sure that it is squared off and everything, and as best I can tell it is squared off, and it should fit fairly well on the top here. That's the plan, is to get this fitting right up there on top. So and then just kind of setting it in place. And what I'm thinking of is probably this portion here will be green to match the car body, and then the frame of the window will be done in copper to match the trim on the car. And then as you can see, it's the acetate just kind of fits in there. Fits pretty well, considering I had to eyeball it and then started having to trim it ever so carefully with my little Spyderco clippy tool, and seemed to work all right. So that's where we are with the window frame. And if you can see here, I should have taken pictures of this, and that is my Cobra shifter. If you know, these come with the oil can shifter that comes with the Hangman. It doesn't have the tiger tail shifter. And I was going to make a tiger tail shifter. See that here. But then as I was doing it, it's like, man, why not you just go ahead and put a Cobra in there? Because you got that big old dragon reptile in the background. So why not put a Cobra shifter in there? Now the Cobra shifter was actually made from basically right here, a piece of 1/8 inch rod that I basically just took and bent it around to fit it to the shape I wanted, and then I sanded down about halfway through it to get a nice flat area for it. And then I took a piece of this evergreen strip, and as you know, that's fairly thick. It's probably about a 32nd of an inch thick. And I basically took an emery board and I just started sanding and sanding and sanding until it was basically paper thin. And then I glued it to the spot on the back and then sanded it into place, and then set up the little Cobra hood for the Cobra shifter. And so that was some of the details that I decided to do as I finished this thing up. If you're familiar with the Dragon Wagon, you're probably aware of the two running boards that run along the side of the body and are supported by, of all things, the exhaust pipes. The exhaust pipes that I'm not using in this build because I'm using the pipes from the Paddy Wagon. And the thing with the running boards is, if you notice right here, that's where the bullet gas tank gets mounted. And here's the bullet gas tank, which I really do like. I like the bullet gas tank. And I was trying to think of how I could attach it to the kit. I was thinking about dangling it underneath the cage, but there's really just not enough room because of the way the rails run here, and that gets in the way of it. So there's no real way to use the bullet gas tank. So I guess I will use that in another build because I'm sure I will not just throw it away. Now, when I built my Hangman, I used a beer barrel and put it on the back like so for the gas tank hanging off the back here. And I was thinking I might do that, but I've already done that. Plus you have the stairs that are on the back of this that drop down, so you really can't mount that there, and there's no place to mount the gas tank there. So what I've come up for a gas tank is the following. I'm basically going to use an evergreen plastic tube, and what I've done is cut out a section and I'm going to put it in the back across there. And so what we have here is this evergreen tube that has been cut out, and I drilled a hole through there with an X-Acto knife and inserted a smaller tube into there, as you can see there. And I've also made a little gas cap, also out of evergreen plastic. Let me get it to focus, which I will eventually use to plug the gas cap there. Well, it's a gas cap. I'll plug the gas tank with it eventually. But what I'm going to do then is I'm going to end up gluing that. Let's see if I can get that in there. Gluing it in place like so, in between there. And the tube will just barely be out to the side. I've got to get it flush against the back of the body there because as you will see, once you put the cage in, there's very little space there for anything. So there'll just barely be the enough space there so that you could actually fill up the gas tank. There's enough for the tube sticking up, but not much more than that. So that's going to be where the gas tank is going to go, in between there. Thinking I'm going to have it fill from the driver's side. Could also fill from the passenger side. It really doesn't matter. But once I get that glued in place, I'll be ready to get the cage on, and then this kit's ready to rock, because I've got most of the cage done, as you can see here. I've got the latch in place on this side. If you remember, there was a lock right down the middle. I wonder if I can see it in the instruction sheet here. Not really. You can't see the lock there, but there is definitely a lock that would have been right in the back of the door. I had to file it down and get it off of there. So in place of that, I've added a latch on this side, and then on the other side here, I've made a lock, and it's just kind of hanging there. Nice big lock. Got to do a little touch-up painting on it. But other than that, the cage is kind of wide open and ready to be put on the back here as soon as I can get the gas tank in place. Okay, so here's the fuel tank now in place and painted. I do need to do some touching up, and obviously it's not a really big fuel tank, but in theory you could also be storing some fuel into the frame of the vehicle, kind of like the way you store fuel in the wings of an aircraft. So maybe that could also be getting done. But when you consider the size of that fuel tank compared to the little bullet fuel tank that was on it to begin with, this might actually hold more fuel anyway. And also, you got to remember, this is just a fantasy show rod. The Hangman didn't even come with a fuel tank, for crying out loud. So when you get that right down to it, didn't really need to put a fuel tank on it, but I really wanted one, so to give it a little bit of realism. So there you have my fuel tank on my new Circus Wagon. Things are coming along swimmingly, I think. We got the front fenders in place. You know, if you're using the Paddy Wagon front end, you really need those fenders that come with the Paddy Wagon. So I got those in place, and so I also want to get the fenders on the back. I finally got the cage glued in place, and so these are the Paddy Wagon fenders, and if you remember, they were actually attached to the frame, and I was attempting to put them on the bottom of the cage, but the attachments just did not work correctly, because basically it was too low, and it would interfere with the tires because of just the height difference and everything. So what I had to do is cut away the portions on it and then make new ones. So that's what I have done. I basically had to cut out gouges. You'll see this third gouge out in the front here. That was going to be so that it would match up underneath the frame of the Circus Wagon, but that's not going to work. I'm not too concerned about the nick. It's on the inside. You won't be able to see it. But I have since taken some evergreen plastic. I think this is 3/32 or something like that. It's under 1/8 of an inch. It's might even be 1/16 of an inch. In any case, it's a rod, and then some block there. And I'm going to end up attaching this to the side of the cage so that it will be up and over the wheels. Okay, so the driver's side rear fender is in place. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll move over to the other side and attach the passenger side rear fender. And if you notice, there's a major space between those, and that's because unlike the front fender, which moves up and down with the front wheel, the rear fender is actually supported off of the cage, and not off of the axle, so it doesn't move with the wheel. So it does need the space there. Now, in order to get it to attach to the floor of the cage, here's the what the cage looks like. And if you notice, there's this lip that runs all the way around the edge of the cage floor for the outside. And so what I had to do is I needed to build up a little spacer here, which basically acts as a rail to attach it to the floor of the cage. And so that will go on, if I can show you there, it just kind of snaps over the edge like that. But then the cage wall is right there, so I had to sand this down in order for it to fit between the cage wall and the floor. So each fender basically had to be hand fitted to either side. And so once this one dries, I will eyeball it to make sure that they're lined up correctly and get the other fender in place. So that's the way these rear fenders are getting attached.
That pretty much wraps up the major alterations made during the kit bash. So let's move on to one more spin on the turntable, this time next to the Hangman, the other kit that uses the frame from the Dragon Wagon. And then we'll move on to some slides.
I mentioned the Hangman earlier, and as you can see, I also talked about the fuel tank that I added, which is actually just a barrel off of the beer barrel. The Hangman does not come with a fuel tank at all. It has a board that goes across the back there, but I removed the board. I wasn't interested in that. Also, it did not come with this or the tanks on the side there. Just something I've added to it. But it's a pretty cool kit with the noose and everything else, which I guess is probably not politically correct anymore. I obviously dirtied mine up a bit, but it's a pretty cool kit. I like the cab that comes with it, and I was actually thinking of using that cab on this Circus Wagon, but it will not fit because of the way the angle is on the cage on the Circus Wagon. It actually would bump into it, so it would interfere. The only way you could get it to fit is if you were to stretch the frame a little bit and move the cage back some, and I wasn't prepared to start cutting the frame there as well, considering what I did up front with the paddy wagon front. I have another, actually I have two more Hangmans to build. I have a total of 4. One of them was turned into the World War I Flying Ace, and I might convert that back, especially now that the Hangman is no more. But I am planning on building another Hangman in the near future and making it all nice and clean and everything. So we'll see how that goes, and I'll probably swap out the engine on my next Hangman too. But it's a real fun kit too. But there you have it. The new Circus Wagon with the paddy wagon front end compared to the Hangman. And I guess I'll move on now and show you a couple of detail shots of the Circus Wagon in a slideshow.